The Great Reset by Glenn Beck. Something just isn't right. We all feel it. An excerpt from chapter 5. Small excerpt. Okay, here's an excerpt of this book. Okay, and the reason I am going to give you an excerpt is because he's the only one that is actually talking about the Great Reset. For 2 years now, I've been asking several journalists to please talk about the Great Reset. Tell us what it is about. No one has done it. Glenn Beck has researched, done his homework, and is now talking about it at length. This Great Reset is real. It's not a conspiracy. I know for a fact. I've been following the World Economic Forum for 2 years now. You need to pay attention to what's going on. You need to go to the World Economic Forum, read up on it, and buy the Klaus Schwab book. He is the engineer behind the Great Reset. And while I think I wouldn't... Glenn Beck says that this is a fascist machine. I think it's just a plain totalitarian machine that the whole world will be put into. It's totalitarianism, whether it's fascism or communism or socialism or Nazism or Castroism or Stalinism or whatever. It's totalitarianism. And the sooner you realize that the reason that our Democrat friends want democracy, the reason they say we're losing our democracy, which we never really had a democracy because our system is not a democracy. We are a republic. Okay? We're not a democracy. We're not mob rule. Okay? We're not ruled by the mob. The mob does not rule in our country. BLM is not the rule. We are ruled by law. Everybody is ruled by law, including our politicians. We consent to law. Our state directly consented to uphold the Constitution. Our state created its own Constitution, making our rights better and clearer than the Constitution. Our state currently is ignoring the Constitution, both constitutions. Okay? And you got to become aware right now. This Build Back Better agenda that Biden had as a slogan was not Biden's. It was a Great Reset. It's the whole world is building back better. COVID was used to build back better at a fast rate. We can all say that COVID is done. We're all done with COVID. I don't care. I am done. I don't know about you, but I'm done. I'm done. I'm done. I'm not wearing a mask. I'm sorry. I'm not afraid of COVID anymore. But be aware of this fascist machine that is here. This is what Glenn Beck wrote. He quoted John Kerry speaking at the World Economic Forum event on June 24, 2020. And I have actually that video because I was watching it in that year. First of all, we have to have the definition of reset correctly. The definition of reset. Reset. We can't think of it in terms of the sort of pushing a button and going back to the way things were. What? What? We can't think of it of going back to our foundational reset? Our foundation? The normal was a crisis. The normal was itself not working. What? The normal was working. I'm sorry, Carrie, but the normal worked. And it is working. Okay? We don't need a reset to something new. We need a reset back to our founding fathers' principles. Okay. Here's what Glenn Beck says. And I don't want to read the entire book, but I will give you enough pages of chapter 5. An international conspiracy between powerful bankers, business leaders, and government officials. Secret meetings in the Swiss Alps and calls for a new world order. The Great Reset is one henchman with an eye patch away from being a great pilot for the next James Bond's movie, which, by the way, means that when Hollywood inevitably makes a blockbuster Great Reset film, the role of Glenn Beck will be played by Daniel Craig. Makes perfect sense to me, but not so much to my wife. In previous chapters, I have shown how the Great Reset would be fueled modern monetary theory, how the conditions have come about that make the reset possible, the coronavirus pandemic, and the justification is for the destruction of the current world economic system, claims of the existential climate change crisis. But to this point, I have deliberately avoided explaining the specific policy changes that Great Reset supporters have in mind when they talk about their plans for the future, and there is good reason for that. Parts of the Great Reset are complicated, very complicated. Unlike conservative political figures like Ted Cruz and Rand Paul, or far-left politicians like Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who typically have no problem telling Americans exactly where they stand on issues, those who favor the Great Reset often shroud their plans using coded language, largely unknown economic theories, and incredibly complex charts and diagrams that make whatever the heck that guy in A Beautiful Mind was sketching look like a children's maze on the back of Denny's Kids menu. Making matters worse, the Great Reset's biggest backers have deliberately chosen to use terminology that sounds appealing to many supporters of free markets, like capitalism, investments, and stakeholders, which, while meaning something very different from what many of us think of when we hear these ideas discussed in the United States. Of course, at times the Great Reset movement could not be clearer. When advocates of the reset say, to achieve a better outcome, the world must act jointly and swiftly to revamp all aspects of our society and economies, from education to social contracts and working conditions, they mean it. Likewise, when they say we need a great reset of capitalism, they mean that too. And when they say we are completely rethinking the tools of economic policy, they are not lying. But as shocking as these and many other Great Reset related statements are, they do not come even remotely close to painting the truly horrifying transformation of the world that the Great Reset movement has in mind when it talks about building its new global society. And although you will not hear Great Resetters openly calling for authoritarianism, the Great Reset is clearly a new kind of soft authoritarianism. The Great Reset is clearly a new kind of soft authoritarianism that is not too far off from the merging of markets, corporatism, authoritarianism, collectivism, and modern technology that has been embraced by the Communist Party of China in recent decades. In confusing terminology and vague language are what makes the Great Reset so dangerous and, frankly, brilliant. Openly calling for a takeover of the global economy by a ruling class would immediately alienate 90% of the general population, but by tying in the Great New Deal, a government jobs guarantee, and a host of other large social welfare programs, they have managed to win over some progressives and socialists who care deeply about those issues. And by painting the movement as a pro-business, pro-capitalism plan to improve the economy, they have managed to win over some establishment political figures on the right. But at its core, the Great Reset is not truly pro-socialism, and it's not pro-capitalism either. It's just a rebranding of the same old tired ideas that elites have pushed 1,000,000 times before. Give us more power, and we promise we'll take care of you and fix the world's ills. Let us manage more of the economy, and we promise you'll be wealthier for it. Give us the authority to punish the bad guys in society, and we'll save the planet from annihilation. I admit that the Great Reset is a little cleverer, is that even a word, Mr. Editor, than some of the schemes that the ruling class have trotted out before. But in the end, no matter what label the elitist snake oil salesman slaps on the front of the bottle, it is still poison he's trying to sell you. Or a former Texas governor, Ann Richards, once said, "You can put lipstick on a hog and call it Monique, but it's still a pig." And make no mistake about it, the Great Reset is a pig, a big, fat, troll-licking pig. The trick to stopping the Great Reset, then, is knowing how to recognize the poison, and then how to keep our friends, families, and neighbors from guzzling it down. So what's exactly the Great Reset, and how do global elites plan to impose it on the entire world? The world to serfdom. We will all be serfs in this new world order. And the only people that will get richer are the ones planning this Great Reset. And this is why you must buy the book at Amazon and learn what the Great Reset is before it's too late. Thank you. Signing off. Many of the decisions made in recent years by politicians, corporations, school boards, Wall Street, and military media, and public health officials have been in more ways than one incomprehensible. Many of us don't recognize our country anymore. You might think you know why our world is changing so rapidly and dramatically, but chances are you have not heard the whole story. Once you understand the Great Reset, however, everything will become clearer. Although many of our neighbors cannot or refuse to realize it, America is a society in the midst of a revolution, one that is well planned, well funded, and well underway. A new, extremely dangerous economic system is being imposed on the world's largest economies, and if fully implemented, it would put banks, financial institutions, investors, and large corporations in charge of virtually every aspect of our lives. If the American people don't soon wake up and stand for individual liberty, freedom could be lost forever. And the dream of Martin Luther King, where we're all free, will be lost as well.